Like he's on championship point and he'll be serving for the world championship in Las Vegas. Hello everyone, welcome to Straight Talks F1. And yes, doing a podcast episode after over a month. The reason being that the ungodly hours of the US and the Mexico GP did not allow me to be sane to record a podcast. Thankfully, the Brazilian GP turned out to be a weekend where things panned out in a way where I can get time to record this podcast. It's been a crazy race weekend in Sao Paulo. Interlagos delivers, it always delivers year on year. It served one of the best races in F1 history, not just this season. It's the best race of the season for sure, but I haven't seen such a race and such a race weekend altogether in the past 6 7 years or so. Max Verstappen finally ending his streak of 10 races without stepping on the top step of the podium, and that too in some dominant and classy style. From 17th on the grid to first place. For the first time in 20 years, after Kimi Raikkonen did that same thing, 17th to first in Japan in 2005, Max Verstappen on a wet, drenched Interlagos track. I could not believe what I was seeing. It was a superb, classy drive from Max Verstappen, and he showed why he's the world champion, why he's dominated the last 2 seasons. An absolute superstar performance, and he's almost sealed that fourth world championship. The aura of that man, he's gone winless for 10 races, and to get back to winning ways in such a fashion that he's within touching distance of his fourth consecutive world championship. Like he's on championship point. In tennis parlance, he's on championship point and he'll be serving for the world championship in Las Vegas. Currently, he has a 62-point lead over Lando Norris. And if he can win in Vegas, that would be game set and match for Verstappen. But besides him, there was a lot to talk about in this Brazilian GP weekend. So much happened. Like, this was a weekend where everything happened. Everything that was possible in a race weekend, in qualifying, in the sprint race, everything that could happen happened. Competitively, there was a lot of ebb and flow. McLaren were the best package overall. Ferrari were a little bit on the back foot. Red Bull did not look as competitive on Friday, but in the sprint race, Verstappen came alive. And then, of course, in the Grand Prix on Sunday, there was some supreme showing of skill in the wet weather. And big kudos to Alpine, Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon. Two race winners, two Frenchmen, a bitter rivalry, childhood friends, a lot of baggage there. This year they have crashed and collided as well in Monaco, in Austria. And Alpine, their car, their package, they were dead last in Bahrain. People were trolling them, I was trolling them, and to see this sort of a turnaround. Yes, it was circumstantial. They took advantage of the red flag, took the gamble of staying out. It worked out supremely well for them. And a double podium was unimaginable. At one point, they were leading the race. It felt like Ocon could actually win ahead of Verstappen. So that would have been bonkers. But you're so happy that all those jokes I have made about them and all the trolling Alpine have received, all that has been proven wrong. It feels good when teams like Alpine, Williams have their moment under the sun. Here, basically under the rain. But that was some deserved redemption for Alpine. So, yeah, so much to talk about this weekend. It had everything: VSC, safety cars, red flag, black flag, a DNS, a DNF. And the winner, obviously, it would be a surprise one because Verstappen and Red Bull, they were not the fancied favorites. Everyone was looking towards McLaren and Lando Norris. On pole, they should have won this race. And yet again, Norris and McLaren have bottled and fumbled another race win. God knows how they do it, but Norris, as I predicted earlier in the season, is on the verge of bottling the world championship. and Max Verstappen is still worthy. Like Verstappen had a Thor like moment, like Thor said in Avengers Endgame, I'm still worthy. So this was that sort of a moment for Verstappen, I would say. His last win coming in Spain, after that, all those issues with the RB20, Austria and Hungary particularly, the collision with Norris in Austria, and then the frustrations in Hungary with the car being a shopping trolley, not being able to turn it properly. There was so much speculation, so many rumors about him wanting to leave Red Bull. A lot has happened at the team as well. So, this was a big moment for Red Bull. Finally, getting back to winning ways after the last 4 5 months of trying turmoil, after the last 4 5 months of turmoil and uncertainty, and on track struggles like they hadn't seen for a long time. For the past 3 years, they were the benchmark, and suddenly they had entered this slump with no solution to the issues, and there perhaps still isn't. The car still has some issues underlying there, and there is no guarantee that the RB20 will run well in Las Vegas and Qatar and Abu Dhabi. But the fact that Verstappen was managed to pull this off, of course, rain being a great equalizer, but you still need the man behind the wheel, and Verstappen was the man there. The car was quite underpowered on Friday, honestly. It did not look like it could challenge for the win, and then in the sprint race, it suddenly came alive. Verstappen said in the presser as well that in the race, their car seems to be coming alive, but that sort of reignited expectations for Red Bull. Now, in the sprint, they would have definitely questioned that VSC call. Late in the race, McLaren were reluctant to swap places with Piastri and Norris, and then there was that incident with Lance Stroll crashing his car. And then there was a VSC called very late, just after McLaren swapped their cars. So the timing of that VSC was definitely questionable. And then the same thing happened with the red flag in Q2. Lance Stroll crashed, and for about a minute, there was no red flag. Stroll crashed at turn 3, and there were double waved yellows at that point. And Verstappen crossed that. He was basically on his flying lap. But as he entered sector 3, they called the red flag. Meanwhile, the McLaren cars, the Ferrari of Leclerc, these guys completed the laps. And Verstappen and Perez got demoted out of the top 10. So it was a highly controversial and bizarre call. And people will ask questions. Now, the bias obligations towards Lando Norris or McLaren, they definitely seem futile, but yes, heads will turn. People will raise eyebrows. If there had to be a red flag, they should have red flagged it at the instance Stroll crashed. Because the way Stroll crashed, it seemed like a clear cut red flag situation. They should have red flagged it immediately, even if that meant that Verstappen did not have enough time to get another lap in, with Q2 resuming later. Fair enough. At least even the McLaren cars and all the other cars who completed the lap times would not have completed those times and improved. Norris and Piastri both improved and went first and third respectively, I remember. So it would have been fair to everyone. Yes, Verstappen could have been able to scrape off into the top 10 in B10, because at that particular moment he was 10th. Two of the cars improved and that demoted him to 12th. So it seems stupid to bring up that bias allegation and everything, because it is the F1 World Championship. At such a level, such sort of a bias, it just won't make sense. From a sporting perspective, from a brand image perspective, at the end of the day, Formula One is a brand. But yeah, overall, that Q2 exit cost Verstappen a lot because he also had a 5 place grid penalty. So he was basically starting 17th with Norris on pole. It seems perfectly set up for Norris to take a huge chunk out of Verstappen's lead. Yes, it did not happen. Verstappen still prevailed against all that. That was his brilliance. Now, there was a lot of chaos that unfolded in between that. Several crash cars, people taking pit lane starts. Alex Albon had to withdraw his car from the Grand Prix because yeah, his car damage was so much that they did not have enough time to repair it. They could only get Colapinto back into the race. And then on the race start, again, Lance Stroll having an off and pitching his car in the gravel on the formation lap. So there was a lot of chaos on the race start as well. I'll talk about it later. But talking about Verstappen's brilliance again, he just showed us class one after the other, picked cars off, overtook them. It was like hot knife through butter. He gained almost 8 to 9 positions on the first lap itself. He was in the points by lap 3, and suddenly there were impending alarms at McLaren perhaps because he was in the top 5, and as the rain increased, McLaren panicked. Lando Norris panicked because he was struggling to overtake Russell, who was leading the race, and that was their mistake. That was turning point of their race because as the rain increased, it was incredibly difficult for them to stay on track. The visibility was getting super low, and Norris and Russell pitted for new intermediate tires, which again did not make sense to me. I thought extreme wet tires would have been the perfect choice for that sort of weather, and there could have been a red flag as well for weather. Eventually, it was Colapinto crashing, and it benefited Verstappen and the Alpine duo big time. They gambled, took the risk to stay out. Norris and Russell gave up track position by pitting for new intermediates, and then the red flag because of Franco Colapinto crashing. It just played out perfectly for Verstappen in second place, and he was getting a free pit stop under the red flag. Now, something very controversial over here, the red flag rule where people can change their tires for free, and that counts as their mandatory pit stop of the Grand Prix. Naturally, Norris was salty about it because he wasn't getting benefited by it. Verstappen and the Alpine duo up front were going to get major benefit out of it because they had to stop. So that free change of tires without losing track position, Norris in fourth would have been doing why did he pit in the first place. Now in hindsight he would say, now he would be adamant that that was the right call given the weather. And as for Verstappen, he got into that place. He did all the hard work coming from P17 to P2. Norris had the advantage. He was starting 16 places ahead of his title rival. So despite that advantage, firstly he fumbled his start. Once again, fell back behind Russell. And then he's complaining about Verstappen getting lucky with the red flag. Fair enough, he got lucky. But at the same time, he did all the hard work, coming from 17th on the grid. I mean, you make your own luck. And then after that restart, Verstappen just went on with his business as usual. Like this was the vintage Max Verstappen. He turned back the clock to 2016, where he made a similar recovery to the podium. And this could have been again another podium had Norris been up there, had one of the Ferraris been up there, had Piastri or maybe the Mercedes drivers being up there, being competitive, fighting for the win. But the fact that it was two Alpines who haven't been competitive all season, Verstappen basically had a clear run at the win, and he took it. That's why he's the world champion. When he's got the chance to take the victory, he rarely falters. This is something Lando Norris has faltered at this season, where he's got the clear-cut chance of taking the win and he hasn't done it. But yeah, Norris lost out a big chunk of points in this race to Verstappen. As for the manner in which Verstappen won eventually, a 19-second gap to Ocon in second place. So a real statement made definitely. Coming from 17th on the grid to win the race by a 19-second margin, that is a real statement. Yes, the Zandvoort win by Norris was definitely commendable, but coming from the back of the grid to win the race by such a big margin, I feel that is some statement. That is a statement and a half. So it was a fitting response to those two wins in Zandvoort and Singapore, those big margin wins. And mainly for Verstappen, his championship lead has increased to 62 points. As I said earlier, he can be crowned champion in Las Vegas itself. It's unimaginable that Verstappen not having the fastest car, and still he has ensured that the championship lead doesn't come too close. It hasn't fallen under 40 points. It hadn't come under 50 points before Mexico as well. So that's been some superb damage limitation by Verstappen. Now the title permutations in Vegas seem a bit extreme. Can Verstappen win another one in Vegas? Would be difficult if the competitiveness isn't there. In Brazil as well, the competitiveness wasn't there. It's just that the rain equalized that pecking order for them. And that's the reason Verstappen was able to do what he did. So in Vegas, it is possible mathematically, but it seems a bit too far fetched. I think realistically, he would once again clinch the title in Qatar, like last year. And as for Norris, I think he needs to accept it now because it was never really a title fight. Certainly not a close one. By no stretch of the imagination has Lando Norris looked threatening for the World Championship. He's been quite passive aggressive at the race starts. His consistency hasn't been there. He's left so many wins on the table. And I think Brazil was just another one of those races for him. Now it was another race and another bottling job from Norris. And he was going superb until qualifying. He looked set and seemed in control to win the race. Where everyone was spinning and crashing out, he seemed like he had the control in those conditions. Even the sprint race, yes, the team orders bit was a bit of a controversial one. Piastri deserved the win definitely, but he moved away to give Norris the win, get that extra point over there. But still, overall, he was there, and McLaren had the car. They had the pace to be up there and get the win. But execution wise, strategy wise, a typical weekend from McLaren and Norris. Now, Piastri wasn't up there. He wasn't up there in Mexico as well. So there was no guarantee of a race win or a podium even. Like that has been the unfortunate reality. Whenever Oscar Piastri has been up there, McLaren's chances of getting a podium or a win have been higher. When it's only Norris, they're fighting with one car, and Norris's inconsistency has always worsened their chances of winning the race. Because whatever people may say and quote the drivers' championship battle and everything, harp on that narrative, I feel this has been one of the most inconsistent title challenges in F1 history. Lando Norris just hasn't produced a consistent enough fight to be in contention for the World Championship. The fact that after Brazil, he's still 62 points away from Verstappen despite having the fastest car for the last 10 races. I mean, too many wins left on the table. I mean, I could go on about this like a broken record, but too many wins left on the table. I don't even want to elaborate now. There have been so many of them. Had he won those, the points deficit at this stage could have been way smaller. Even the 44-point deficit after the sprint, that could have been somewhere around 15 or 20 points. But yeah, now this point swing in Verstappen's favor, I think this is decisive. Verstappen will win in Vegas or Qatar. There's no doubt about it. Like if it wasn't already, now it is impossible for Norris to win the driver's title. Because the way he bottled this race in Brazil, I think it just summed up his season. Starting briskly, then had a really good sprint part of the weekend, put his car on pole, got into the contention for the race win, that he could be the winner, and then his Grand Prix unraveled, and his prospects just derailed from there. Fumbling the race start again, that's basically become the norm for him, that he doesn't lead the first lap from pole. Barring Singapore, which was the only exception, Norris hasn't led the first lap from pole at any race, wherever he's taken pole. And then, of course, the errors at the restart, going deep into turn 1, losing positions, falling down to seventh. How is he supposed to win the world championship then? The sheer contrast between him and Verstappen, if we call them the two title protagonists, the contrast between their cars, the Red Bull RB20 and the McLaren MCL38, and the contrast between Verstappen and Norris, it's quite inversely proportional. As good as the McLaren is, Norris is equally bad at maximizing the car's potential. Like, he has a lot to learn in terms of winning the world championship, fighting for the world championship. His race starts definitely need a big improvement. And even his off track comments. Like, fair enough, he is allowed to be salty. Drivers who lose races despite being the front contender, yes, there will be some sort of regret. There will be some sort of jealousy even towards the winner, towards their rival. But there's also something called sportsmanship and not being a sore loser. And especially in this case, where Verstappen, his title rival, has produced a generational drive, a race win that will be remembered for ages, and people will quote this race win, saying, "Remember the day Verstappen won from 17th in torrential rain at Interlagos?" Is that sort of a win? And Norris's first reaction is, "It's not talent, it's luck." That Verstappen got lucky because of the red flag, and that's the reason he won. I mean, how bad a sore loser can someone be? Yes, he has done a lot of damage control after those comments. Of course, the McLaren PR department would have got in touch with him. He put an Insta story congratulating Verstappen and reflecting on his weekend. He also commented on Verstappen's post, just like Hamilton and Alonso, who had far worse weekends. But they were the first ones to comment on Verstappen and congratulate him because they knew the kind of drive it was, the kind of race win it was. So it was quite a distasteful comment, I would say, from Norris. He has a lot to learn. He's young, so definitely he has a lot to learn. I hope he does. Because for Verstappen to go from 17 to first, and even if he meant that for the Alpines, and Alpines definitely got lucky. Gasly was 15th on the grid. Yes, Ocon was 4th, so he was there in the fight. But Gasly went from 15 to 3rd and then got the benefit of the red flag. So they definitely got lucky. Even if Norris meant for the Alpines that they got lucky because of the red flag and he would have been on the podium, still it's commendable that Gasly did so, that he survived all that chaos. And yes, luck is needed to, capitalize on that good work, but then the talent is equally appreciated and it should be appreciated. To not have a crash in those conditions, keep your car on track, where he himself went deep into turn 1. I don't remember Ocon or Gasly going off track in the race. Verstappen definitely did not. And they took the gamble, they took the risk to stay out, and it paid off. That's how it happens in sport. At times, these calculated risks pay off, and the fastest driver or the fastest car or the best athlete or the best team may not win. You got to perform on the day, you got to perform in that particular moment, and that could be a decisive moment. So yeah, can't even imagine that Verstappen praised him after Miami, despite people saying that he got lucky because of the safety car and won that race. But Verstappen still praised his medium tire stint. He said that, that's how it happens. It's part of the sport. The safety cars and red flags can happen, and a driver can capitalize on that to win the race. So it's unimaginable that Verstappen showers praise after that Miami win on a similar sort of circumstance where he got lucky because of the safety car. And here, after this sort of a generational drive that would be remembered for ages, Verstappen gets a talent versus luck jibe. And even for the Alpines, it's just not acceptable, I feel. And what about Norris's race himself? What about his talent? Well, going from pole to sixth, finishing sixth after starting on pole and having such a good advantage over the field, I mean, that's his talent and skill.
Now, keep I can't, it's broken! It's broken!
Because a win in this race and a comfortable point swing, about 15 20 points, maybe even 10 15 points for that matter, that should have made a big dent to Verstappen's lead, would have got Norris into serious contention. That lead could have been around 20 30 points, even lesser, maybe. Who knows? The best case scenario was Norris having a 25 26 point swing, points deficit coming down to 19 points. So the fact that the converse has happened and Verstappen has gained points, I mean, that is the death of Norris's title hopes in 2024. Unless something drastic happens. And I think this Brazil weekend was the drastic one that decisively has swung the championship pendulum. I don't think Norris is winning the Drivers' Championship for sure now. Like, I have felt this convincingly since the Dutch GP, even before that. Now I think it's a much more well accepted notion. 62 points, 3 races. That's it for Lando Norris. Now, Alpine. They were dead last in Bahrain. Like, they were nowhere in the pecking order. Like, barely scoring points. Ninth, 10th, 8th at max. Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, two childhood friends and then rivals, had a very salty relationship. They were having crashes in Monaco. And then this performance turnaround. A double podium in Brazil. It's unimaginable. Can't even think about Alpine being on the podium. And Gasly said that no one would have bet on that. Ocon usually is superb in wet conditions. He's always shown that. Even Gasly, for that matter. French drivers, besides English and Japanese drivers, they always excel in the wet. And Ocon, from fourth on the grid, he was leading the race. I couldn't have imagined where they were in Bahrain, in China, in those early races. In Brazil, they were leading the race. Gasly was third from 15th on the grid. Personally, like as I mentioned earlier, I had trolled and mocked Alpine a lot during the pre-season testing period. The car performance in Bahrain was abysmal. The car was overweight. The livery definitely unimpressive. It still is unimpressive, but yes, the car definitely they have developed, they have worked on it, and ensured that they at least become a point scorer. Yeah, like I had made a lot of jokes about Alpine's car, their front wing and their nose being a baguette. They could have used French wine instead of fuel, and it still won't work. So all those French jokes, I hope those have been proven wrong. Kudos to Alpine, hats off Alpine. Like this could again be a one-off performance. Last year they got a couple of podiums. We've seen them win a race in 21 as well, and they haven't really made up a positive step up in the pecking order as such. We at least saw Aston Martin do that last year, but Alpine haven't. So this could again be a one-off, but still, it was a supreme showing, and I hope they really make a step up next year because at least those two drivers, Gasly and Ocon. Ocon won't be at Alpine next year, he would go to Haas. But Gasly, particularly, he deserves a good car. And Alpine is a decent team. The history of that team, Team Enstone, it's a championship winning team. So, as much as we want to see McLaren or Williams or Ferrari do well, being these veterans of the sport, Alpine are also sort of veterans of the sport. They have raced since the 80s and 90s, and hopefully they get back into win contention, they get back into podium contention. That's still a long shot, 27, 28. It'll take time, but yeah, this was a moment to remember, a moment Gasly and Ocon will cherish for the rest of their lives. They haven't been the best of pals, even as teammates, and maybe they could still have some animosity after this race as well. It's rivalry that has brewed on and on, so much history, so much of baggage between them. But them reconciling and enjoying it together on November 3rd in Sao Paulo, they were so united. And and they just knew the value of that podium. Two French drivers having grown up together, competed together, now teammates in F1 at a French team, and to have a double podium. It's a dream come true, perhaps. God knows if either one could ever be a world champion or not. Gasly and Ocon, these are the sort of drivers, they are exceptional midfield drivers. Do they enter the elite level drivers? I don't think so. Maybe one of them might just do that. It depends on the kind of teams they join. It depends on the kind of cars they get. So this could be one of the highlights of their careers, realistically speaking. But yeah, two kids from Normandy, having grown up together, they were really, really happy on that podium. And for Alpine as well, a big gain in the Constructors' Championship. So it's a redemption on all fronts. They were ninth in the standings. They had been ninth in the standings for a long time. And Gasly got a couple of points in the sprint. So their points tally got up to 16 points before the Grand Prix. They were still 1 point behind Williams. And this haul of 33 points, the most of any team in the Grand Prix. No other team scored as many points as Alpine, and they suddenly jumped up to sixth in the standings, overtaking Williams, Haas, RB in one race. Suddenly, they have $26 million more in terms of constructors' prize money. That is a huge gain. And yes, they have Haas and RB behind them chasing just 5 points between the three constructors. So that would be an interesting battle now for P6. Earlier it was only between Haas and RB. Haas did not score any points. RB scored. And now you have Alpine competing in there. So yes, a true Alpine redemption there. Now the 2024 Brazilian GP, it will be a race remembered for eternity, because it was a race where everything happened. Every sort of event that would happen in an F1 Grand Prix. There was rain, there were VSC periods, there were safety cars, there were red flags, there was even a black flag disqualification for the first time since 2008. Nico Hulkenberg's Haas getting the black flag after his car was assisted by marshals to get back on track. Then there were a couple of DNS for Albon and Stroll, several DNFs. There were spins, there were collisions, there were crashes, multiple formation laps, which we have seen this season as well, and previously last season as well. And then there was an aborted start, which is quite rare in F1. So many things happening, and it was just too difficult to process. Like yellow flags were just a regular norm. In qualifying in the Grand Prix, someone or the other was spinning or crashing in the barriers every other lap. Every 10-15 minutes, there used to be something or the other happening. And firstly, qualifying happened on Sunday, only for the sixth time in the history of the sport. It's a very rare occurrence. Last time it happened was in 2019 in Japan. Qualifying had to be postponed because of the inclement weather on Saturday. There was bad light as well. So it happened early morning, 7:30 local time in Sao Paulo on Sunday, hours before the race. And even the race was preponed to 12:30. And then the amount of crashes that happened on Sunday in qualifying and in the Grand Prix. I don't think any driver would have avoided an off-track moment throughout the weekend. Sometime or the other, each driver would have gone off track or had a spin or had a crash or collision with someone. And in terms of the crashes, there will be some huge damage bills for many teams. Williams in particular, 3 crashes in the same day. I mean, 2 cars, 3 crashes in one day. The math doesn't add up, but that's how it happened. Franco Colapinto crashed twice in qualifying as well as in the Grand Prix. Albon crashed once in qualifying, and that was it for him. But yeah, that's been the story for Williams in 2024. They have had so many crashes. Albon, Sargent, now Colapinto as well. And the Williams mechanic, after seeing Colapinto crash on lap 32, one mechanic was visibly frustrated with his hand on his head, because it had been a busy day for them. Waking up early at 4 a.m., early qualifying, and then the race. And then to repair both cars, Albon's car was not going to get ready in time, but they were still repairing it. They got Alpine to back into the race, repaired it in time, and then to see that car crash out where they again had to repair it. It's definitely frustrating. What a feel for the mechanics. But yeah, to be fair to the drivers, everyone else, like many others, crashed. Carlos Sainz, Fernando Alonso, Lance Stroll, Oliver Behrman also ended up in the barriers. Behrman, as a side note, he was replacing Magnussen, who was unwell. So yeah, wasn't an exceptional case for Williams itself that they had the most amount of crashes. Well, that they did, but even others had crashes. Aston Martin particularly, Lance Stroll and Alonso, big crashes in qualifying, and then Stroll beaching his car in the gravel on the formation lap. Did not have a lot of damage, but that was definitely undesirable for them. They were going to leave pointless basically from the weekend, with Alonso struggling as well. And for Lance Stroll, I don't know what he's doing. To see him dive into the gravel basically after spinning out on the formation lap, he seems uninterested in press conferences. I don't understand why he wants to stay in the sport. Like, if it wasn't for Lawrence Stroll owning the team, I don't think he's staying in the sport. The fact that his dad owns the team, yeah, it's an open secret why he's there in the sport. But the way he performs, there's just nothing to say over there. But yeah, because of his spin and beaching his car in the gravel, it stimulated a different sort of confusion at the race start because all drivers were geared up for the start and then they had to abort the start, which created confusion because some drivers felt that they had to go on another formation lap, particularly Norris and Russell, who were at the front. And then Sunoda and Lawson followed them, and then the others also followed them to go on another unscheduled formation lap. That wasn't supposed to happen, but they went on with it despite it being an aborted start. An aborted start usually means that they have to go through the starting procedure again, stay on the grid, and then embark on the formation lap when the green light goes off. So there was full confusion on the grid. About 5 or 6 cars, including Verstappen, just stayed there because they knew it was an aborted start, so they had to stay there. But people just left because they thought it's another formation lap. But there was a confusion because it's a difficult weekend, so much is going on. There's rain, they are worrying about the tires, so much to think about. So it's difficult, and this sort of confusion can happen, and everyone is human, so even race control would have been confused as to what was going on. Nobody would expect such a situation to happen where the driver is spun on the formation lap, he's beached his car, and so they have to abort the start because it is not safe to race on the track there. Now, the red flag situation, as I said, after Colapinto's crash, Norris worrying about it and complaining about it. It's a classic situation. Sometimes some drivers get the benefit of it. Here, Verstappen, Ocon, and Gasly got the benefit of it. Norris, Russell, and the others did not. It could have easily been vice versa. I feel Norris needs to stop worrying about these secondary aspects, the time penalties, track limit violations, who gets the benefit of a red flag and everything, and just step up his game. Because this was his race to win. He had the pace, and his title rival, who's starting from 17th on the grid, in a seemingly under par car than himself, and he doesn't win the race, instead finishes 6th. Like, he fumbled the start, then the safety car restart as well. So it doesn't help his case. Yes, the red flag would have ruined his chances, but he hasn't done anything to help his chances. As for the red flag, it happened due to Colapinto's crash. But I don't understand one thing. When the rain was intensified, why did they pit Norris and Russell for new intermediate tires? I just don't understand why teams hesitate to use the extreme wet tires so much. Like, RB pitted for extreme wets, and a couple of others did as well. I think it was Perez with Red Bull pitting him. Yes, they complain about the wet tires not being raceable and not being good enough to compete and not being good enough to drive in that wet weather. And because they are rarely used, I don't think Pirelli pays too much attention to those as well. Usually, whenever there's wet weather races, teams would most likely use the intermediate tires for qualifying because that's the fastest tire. And even in the race, even if there is torrential rain, there will be a red flag, there will be an interruption by the FIA, and they won't have to use the wet tires. The wet tires usually are only used under the safety car. Whenever there's a rolling start, they have to use the wet tires. Here in this case, where rain intensified after lap 2025, I feel the wet tires could have been perfect. It could have been faster than the intermediates, and that could have changed the dynamic of the race had Colapinto not crashed. And because RB had pitted for wet tires, Perez had pitted, I think Red Bull have taken that risk to pit Verstappen as well, and that would have been a good trigger for everyone else. Because if the inters were slower at that particular point of time, even a period of 10 laps or so, where the wet tire runners are faster and they make passes and Verstappen suddenly is in the lead of the race, the fabric of the entire race changes. Suddenly you have people on the wet tires. Maybe some would have stayed out on the inters to just gamble that the rain just eases off and their inters can again be the better tire. But that would have really thrown a spanner in the works. So yeah, the red flag stoppage sort of neutralized the race. It often happens in such a case where the rain is extreme and even the extreme wets could be difficult to drive. But then these teams just don't use extreme wets in a race condition. I hope Pirelli improves their wet tires because it would be really interesting to see people on wet tires and people on intermediate tires when the rain is increasing. How would they balance it out? Two different compounds with two different characteristics in wet weather with the different depth of their groove. It would be quite interesting. I hope Pirelli improves their wet tires so that we can see them in these conditions. But yeah, so many things happening, and like it was the most hectic race weekend of the season and so eventful. So many things happened, as I said earlier. Everything that could have happened in a Grand Prix, we saw that in Interlagos. So yeah, after that sort of a frenzied race weekend, the championship battle is basically decided, I would say. Las Vegas and Qatar could be the decisive races of the 2024 season for both championships. Like the Drivers' Championship could be decided in Vegas itself. If Verstappen can just outscore Norris by even a single point, he wins the title. And even if he can keep his points loss to 1 or 2 points at max, for Norris to delay Verstappen's title celebrations to Qatar, he needs to outscore Max by 3 points. Currently, the lead is 62. He needs to ensure that Verstappen leaves Vegas with a lead of less than 60 points, which, of course, if he can win, that's easily possible. But that would only delay Verstappen's crowning moment to Qatar. In Qatar, it's very realistic that Verstappen will be crowned 4-time world champion. And of course, if he wins in Vegas, that would be it. As for the constructors, that's a lot more tricky. It will all depend on how competitive Ferrari is. And that is the major issue for Ferrari. Looking at the past trends, Qatar and Abu Dhabi are not their best tracks. Qatar, particularly. Last year, they struggled a lot. So, Vegas is their chance. Vegas is their chance to capitalize on their good performance. We've seen in Austin, we've seen in Mexico, and they can get close in their title fight. Currently, 36 points is the gap between McLaren and Ferrari. And if Ferrari can produce an Austin like weekend or a Mexico like weekend in Vegas, yes, there is a chance for Ferrari to win the Constructors' title. 16 years since winning their last Constructors' Championship. Actually, 16 years since both McLaren and Ferrari won their last titles. McLaren their last drivers' title in 2008 and Ferrari winning the constructors the same year. And for McLaren's constructors' title, that last came in 1998. So 26 years since that. That would be rather interesting to see who breaks their streak. If Ferrari ends their drought of 16 years of no world championships, that would be quite spectacular to watch. Like, yes, McLaren has been the form team, they've had this resurgence this year. The car has been the best and it's been the fastest for most of the season now. But Ferrari winning the Constructors' title for the first time since 2008, that would be the fairy tale of the season. Despite all the mid season slump they had, that would be something to watch out for in Abu Dhabi. I think it would go down to the wire in Abu Dhabi, but let's see how Vegas and Qatar go. A lot is on the line. And as for Red Bull, they are definitely out of the race. With only Verstappen scoring points, they could at max look at P2, 13 points behind Ferrari in P3. So there is a chance they can secure P2. But I think Red Bull would just look to secure the driver's title and maybe secure P2 if they can. But even if they can't, I think that would be the season for them. Knowing the amount of issues they have faced with the drivers, with the car, off track, Max Verstappen still winning the World Championship for the fourth consecutive time and emulating Sebastian Vettel, equaling his record for 4 consecutive World Championships. That would be quite something for Red Bull. Let's see when that moment comes, whether in Las Vegas or Qatar. Last year it happened in Qatar, and that was quite an event. If it happens in Vegas, which is going to be the most entertaining race weekend of the season, from a spectacle perspective, as it was with the glitz and glam last year. As for the best weekend, I think Brazil was it. Hands down, it was the best of the season. I don't think any other race can top it. And there was so much to talk about this race weekend in Interlagos that I haven't even spoken about what happened in Austin and Mexico. Ideally, after a break like this, where I don't do episodes for multiple races, I would review those in that particular episode. In the next episode, I do review the events of those weekends. And a lot happened in Austin and Mexico. Track limits penalties to Verstappen and to Norris. That battle in Austin. But that's the thing, so much happened in Brazil, it overshadowed everything that happened in USA and Mexico. So that's been the nature of this Brazilian GP weekend. That it sort of washed away all the controversy. The rain in Interlagos literally washed away all the controversy that had happened in the last 2 weeks. But nevertheless, it has set us up well for the concluding triple header. So let's see how the championship concludes. We are set for a mind-boggling conclusion to the season in the last 3 races. Like in what has been a superb season of racing, so many race winners, Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, Red Bull, all teams tasting glory. And I think the Brazilian GP just summarized the season because at some point each team sort of had their moment. There is a 3 week break definitely before Vegas, but I think that will fly away. And I think it's good enough because so much has happened in Brazil that this break is needed to digest all of that, all of those events, and hopefully the last 3 races live up to it. But yeah, that's it from my end in this episode. I really enjoyed the weekend entirely. Was one of the best weekends I have watched in F1. So arigato and stay tuned until next time.